my story began as a high schooler where I won a Florida State championship and I commit to play for Alabama. However, I transferred a year later because I didn't get on the field, and that's how I ended up at Michigan State for 3 seasons where I put up some amazing stats. But I wasn't happy about where my draft stock was, so I went back to Alabama where I won a Heisman and a national championship. After I spent 5 years in college, I was excited to finally be moving on to the NFL. And even though I was only 5'5", I was projected to be a first-round pick, so when my name got called on draft night, I was thrilled to find out I was going to be an Indianapolis Colt. I couldn't believe I'd actually made it to the league, and the first thing I did was tour my new team's facilities. One of the initial things I heard was,
"I take great pride in making sure my players are taken care of on and off the field."
So that made this place even better. But I was ready to get into some actual games. Unfortunately, I had to go through practice first, and I did not do good in my first drill of the year, but my coaches were still very supportive. I'm not sure what Frank Wright did with Jeff Saturday, but I was ready to start the preseason, and I had to actually run my routes, which is a foreign thing for me. I'm not gonna lie, I was struggling to adjust to the speed of the NFL, so I got taken out of the game, but I'd get back in and make my first catch later on. However, I can't sit here and act like I was doing well, as this play resulted in a pick 6, and by the half, it wasn't looking good for us. Even though I was starting to make a ton of easy catches, I wasn't enjoying playing Madden 23. The camera angles were terrible, and I had to play every snap of every game, so I decided that I was going to do this a different way by simming everything unless I make the Super Bowl. That means this video will feature my entire NFL career, and my rookie season goal was 6 touchdowns. Through 4 games, we were 2-2, and I had already gotten into the end zone 3 times, which made me the 113th best receiver in the league. My first ever upgrade increased my route running, and I was excited to get my team into the playoff picture. I kept getting better throughout the year, and I couldn't believe this was the only way to check my division standings. I ended up making the playoffs as a rookie, and I'm happy to say we beat the Ravens. However, I didn't contribute at all, and the next week against Cincinnati, I only made 1 catch, which is weird considering how good of a rookie year I had. I'm not quite sure why I disappeared in the playoffs, but I was sad that I came 4th in Offensive Rookie of the Year. The Colts ended up drafting a quarterback in the 3rd round, but somehow Jacoby Brissett was back as QB1. I was the 2nd best receiver on the team going into my 2nd year, and my goal was to catch 8 touchdowns this season. Even though I was incredibly fast, by the middle of the year I felt like being 5'5" was limiting me, along with being on a run-heavy offense with a quarterback that certainly wasn't the best. So I was willing to consider finding a new team. It's ridiculous that this is the only way to see records in Madden 23, but we had to win out to make the playoffs, and after we lost at Jacksonville like we always do, I was watching the playoffs from the couch. However, my overall continued to increase, and I smashed my season goal again with these stats. The Bills finally won a Super Bowl, and I stopped myself from changing teams this early into my career. So I went into my 3rd season as a Colt, but I was now the 4th best receiver on the roster. And by mid-season, I hadn't seen the field. We ended up making the playoffs as the number 1 seed, and even though we went 14-3, I still hadn't gotten in for a single play. Our first opponent was the Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes knocked us out. Technically, I shouldn't say us since I didn't get to play, and I was so close to requesting a trade because of that, but I saw that I'd be the wide receiver 3 and stayed. Then the Colts drafted Parker Ham to be the starting QB, who got us to 4-3 in his first 7 games. I was up to a 78 overall, and by mid-season, I was on pace to have my best year yet. But as a team, we were a disappointment as we missed the playoffs going 8-9. But I didn't care because I went over 1,000 receiving yards, and I was glad I stayed in Indianapolis. Somehow, the Cowboys won the Super Bowl, and I realized I only had 1 year left as a Colt. I was hoping to get a new contract offer throughout the year, but after we started 1-5, I didn't know if that offer would come. However, then I saw a text from Frank Wright, which unfortunately ended up not being contract related and resulted in him challenging me to score 3 touchdowns in 1 game. Obviously, that didn't end up happening, and we finished the year 4-13. Even though I was now an 80 overall, my stats regressed from last season, and I never got a new contract offer, so I sat back and watched the playoffs. All of a sudden, I was a free agent, but now it was time to choose a new team, and I decided to play for Mike Tomlin. I was now a Philadelphia Eagle, but to my surprise, Jalen Hurts wasn't the quarterback. which meant it was probably going to be a long year. On the bright side, I was wide receiver 1, but we started the season 2-5, and I knew the playoffs were probably out of reach. I was already 28 years old, so even though I had my best statistical year yet, and I was up to the 69th best receiver on the legacy board, I needed to start making playoff runs, because if the Cowboys can win this much, there's no reason I can't. But then I realized I was already regressing as a player, and I don't know how because I'm only 29. I had only been in the NFL for 6 seasons, but the good thing was I hadn't lost any speed, and I felt like I could achieve 1,500 receiving yards this year. Unfortunately, we didn't start the season well at all, and I was on pace to have much worse stats. However, I improved my game throughout the year, and I put up some very respectable numbers, but I was a part of the worst offense in the league. So we obviously didn't make the playoffs, and I watched Tom Brady get his 8th Super Bowl. I went down to a 78 overall in the offseason, and instead of finding a new team to win with, I decided to stick with the Eagles. It was nice having the opportunity to put up these amazing stats, but then I realized that Jalen Waddle was brought in to replace me, which made me underestimate how I'd perform. Somehow, I finished as the leading receiver on the team, and my career was going just as well as Jalen Waddle's. We ended up actually making the playoffs. However, this could be my last game as an Eagle, and the Bears made sure it was. I only went for 70 receiving yards, and it hurt to know I failed to make a Super Bowl. I was now a free agent again, and after having 3 years in a row over 1,000 receiving yards, I was surprised all of my offers were so bad. I decided to go with the Bills, and not only did the jersey look good on me, but I was excited to play with Josh Allen. I knew he could get me 10 touchdowns, and by mid-season, we were 5-3. We ended up making the playoffs as a 5 seed, but unfortunately, I didn't lead the team in receiving. However, I was just excited to win a playoff game because this could be my last shot at a Super Bowl. Sadly, we ended up losing to the Dolphins, and that loss hurt more than ever. At this point, I wanted to bandwagon my way to a Super Bowl, so I went to the team with the highest record last year, and I knew I'd probably barely see the field, but a championship would be worth it. To my surprise, we started out 2-6, and we completely missed the playoffs. I realized I wasted one of my final years for nothing, and that the Browns successfully sold their dignity for a Super Bowl. I had fallen off to a 74 overall, and I'm not saying I'm proud of this decision, but listen, hear me out. I just wanted to sit on the bench while winning a Super Bowl, and we made the playoffs as a 2 seed. The best part was I got better throughout the year, and I went over 1,000 receiving yards again. I was upset we lost in the first round, but then I realized I was so close to hitting 10,000 career yards, so I knew I'd have to play for one more year, and I decided to stay in Cleveland, where we ended up missing the playoffs, but I ended up getting just enough receiving yards, putting me over 10,000 total in my 11-year career. So I was ready to finally call it quits, and I retired from the NFL. After a long career, this series finally ends, so let me know in the comments which position I should do my next Road to Glory on.